Well, it was a big day in the US as voters turned out in Michigan for the 2024 Republican and Democratic primary elections. Let's break this down with the Australian's Washington correspondent, Adam Creighton. Adam, great to see you as always. Look, Donald Trump came out on top, as expected, of course, against his main rival, Nikki Haley. Joe Biden also did well, but not as high as some expected he should have done.
Yes. Yeah, certainly for Donald Trump, it was a great night. He got 68% of the vote and Haley got 27%, which was one of her worst results so far. And it's also worth bearing in mind that Donald Trump only visited Michigan 3 times in more than 12 months. So he barely campaigned there at all. And Nikki Haley massively outspent him on advertising. Now, for the president, you're right. It wasn't a great result. He got about 80% of the vote. But for an incumbent president, that's not fantastic. He should get 97% like he did last week in South Carolina. So some dissatisfaction there among voters. And it probably comes down to the large Arabic population in Michigan, some 350,000. They typically vote Democrat. And of course, they're quite angry with the US government's policy in Israel. And so there was a groundswell of support there to vote uncommitted. And the uncommitted box got about 100,000 votes, which is probably ringing some alarm bells in the White House.
No, I saw your piece that you wrote for The Australian about this, and I thought that was really interesting that, you know, the perception that I wouldn't agree with, that Biden's been too pro-Israel, was an issue for him in Michigan, and that was probably why he's ramped up his rhetoric about demanding a ceasefire.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't obviously, draw a direct link, but it's certainly possible. I mean, it's a coincidence to me, seemingly, that this has just occurred in the past 2 weeks, just before the primary. And this is something that they're worried about because this state is very important. It's got 10 million people in it. Trump won it by 10,000 votes in 2016, and Biden won it by 150,000 votes in 2020. And so small numbers can make a big difference. And so I thought, especially in relation to the sudden announcement about the legality of settlers on the West Bank, that just seemed to come out of nowhere. And it was just made in the last few days. And so I tend to think probably that it had something to do with the primary, don't you?
No, it does make sense. Look, Greg Sheridan was on Sky News earlier, the Australian's foreign editor, and he spoke about how there might still be a change from Joe Biden, but it could happen later in the year at the Democratic Convention. What's your view on this?
Yeah, certainly there could be. I mean, until 1968, these conventions are actually where the presidential candidate was indeed chosen. It's only fairly recently that that it all gets kind of wrapped up in advance because of the various rules in different states. So it is possible that it kind of goes back to the old way. I mean, it's not going great for President Biden. I predicted a year ago that he wouldn't be the candidate. I still think he probably won't be. It's going to depend on the polling, but his polling is absolutely appalling. And at this stage, he can't win the election against Donald Trump at these poll levels. So the question is, though, who do they replace him with? And the Democrat bench is pretty thin, I think. I mean, there's Gavin Newsom in California, but, there are many questions about how he's going to translate to the national scene. So they have a thin bench. And
I guess
ultimately, if you have a determined president who wants to run again,
anyone would be better than Joe Biden when he can't finish a sentence. And I'm not going to let you finish yours. Adam Creighton, thanks so much for joining us tonight.